All right, everybody, welcome. This is a very exciting session you happen to be attending right now. So very glad to have you in the audience to share what I think is one of the most important parts of the Kubernetes project. So do a quick introduction here.
Hey, so I'm Stephen Augustus. I currently work at Red Hat as a specialist solutions architect on the OpenShift Tiger team. For the Kubernetes community, I am the SIG release chair, as well as the SIG Azure chair, and the one of the sub-project leads for SIG PM.
I am Jaice DuMars. I work at Google in the cloud native open source strategy, and I'm a program manager there. In the Kubernetes community, I'm co-chair of SIG architecture, and I lead a sub-project in SIG PM. I am emeritus leadership for the release SIG, and former release leader, and I am on the Kubernetes Code of Conduct Committee. So, generally speaking, if you see something or something that you think is inappropriate for the conference and you see me, I'm a person that can help you and get you to the right places. And so,
we have superpowers, don't we?
Oh yeah, superpowers. Tell me about yours, Stephen.
So my superpower is I like turning technical debt into action. I have a penchant for finding places that need to be fixed and working on them. So, what about you, Jaice?
You know, mine is surviving lightning strikes, because why not? We're having a deep discussion about the fact that you can actually be struck by lightning in a car. So don't think because you're in a car you're totally safe. You are not. So yeah, I just want to start with a little bit about KEP history. Show of hands in the room, because this is always interesting. Who in the room feels like they have a pretty good handle on what a KEP is? Okay.
Who in the room has ever heard of a KEP? Okay.
All right. So yeah, so this idea came about from a wonderful gentleman who is sitting over here and joining us, Caleb Miles.
Caleb Miles.
Who is somebody who has seen the need for the ability to convey value and trust across a community like Kubernetes that's growing quickly in a way that preserves that history in source control, and also provides certain assurances that can be documented programmatically. So the KEP process was essentially a melding of the REST RFC process and the Python PEP process and a lot of other governance models that have worked well across other communities.
So moving forward in this kind of like spectrum of the history of KEPs, we intend, or actually, well, a lot of the code is already written and ready to provide to the community, a library for interacting with KEPs. So imagine, if you will, a KEP CLI tool that will allow people who want to propose enhancements to the project. So if we haven't defined KEPs before, KEPs are Kubernetes Enhancement Proposals. So it will allow people to, one, propose new enhancements to the project, for approvers and reviewers within SIGs to actually take a look and decide whether that KEP should be accepted or rejected or withdrawn or what have you. There's essentially a library for moving through that flow of accepting an enhancement into Kubernetes. So we'll see more on the states for KEPs later.
So why was this needed? Why is this something that we need? Doesn't this just feel like process for process sake, or somebody trying to come up with something? Well, actually, it turns out that we had a proposal process in place from an early part of the project. And those who were interfacing with the proposal process found it to be cumbersome, to be not really useful for capturing all the things that were necessary to convey value to people who read it. The lifecycle management of a proposal was really unclear, especially determining who are the proper stakeholders. And this was also early in the governance lifecycle of Kubernetes, so the proposal process was definitely not working.
So this is also prior to formation of some of the cross-functional SIGs within the project. So we're talking SIG release and the release team and things that we come to know and love and expect from a Kubernetes release or the overall lifecycle. So definitely necessary.
Yeah, so KEPs provide a vehicle to have consistent data, consistent information and sharing across different groups, so that when multiple people look at a KEP, they're going to be looking at the same thing and have a same shared understanding of what that is and what it does.
And one of the means for doing that is kind of introducing the concept of having metadata for all of the KEPs, right? So we talked about the inconsistency of having a design proposal, right? You have, at this point, we have 31 SIGs, and every SIG works differently. Every SIG has a different means for suggesting change. So if we can find a common set of values, the SIGs who are participating, the authors of the KEPs, the people who are reviewing them, KEP numbers, which so an idea of metadata for these KEPs so that we can start to programmatically use them. So whether it's kind of calling them into the contributor side, or being able to search them, or being able to understand what's happening during the scope of a release, or across the scope of multiple releases, right? So starting to bring out this idea of one, associating metadata, and with the idea of starting to bring in like roadmaps for Kubernetes. So
yeah, and one more point here too is important to have is that one artifact can serve many different purposes. The idea that you have a single point of data and have different views of that data and different lenses that can apply to different use cases. So when do you need a KEP? So we have this little quote here: if an enhancement would be described in either written or verbal communication to anyone besides the KEP author or developer, you should consider writing a KEP. So that means pretty frequently. Yes, probably much more so than you would think. And again, the KEP is intended to have a way to convey value and importance and how these ideas of things that you want to solve can be applied to SIGs. So it's just a good way to capture your thoughts about what you want to deliver.
So the anatomy of a KEP, as we start to dive in a little bit, so the KEPs that were initially proposed and the template that was proposed, we have this concept of metadata, and then motivation, the summary, and the associated artifacts with the KEP. So we're going to kind of break down each of those pieces right now. Right. So the metadata. This is, I think everyone's worked on Kubernetes and is used to seeing a YAML file at this point. It's very similar. So top down, we've got authors, the title of the KEP, the KEP number, which I think we're doing something different.
We're gonna ditch the number altogether.
Yeah.
The KEP number has not been a success, let me put it that way.
Yeah. But reviewers, approvers, the SIGs that are participating, the current status that the KEP is in, as well as the different sections that are associated with.
Yeah, and we'll get into what those sections are in a moment. So again, we talked about KEP serving many audiences, and there's a lot of different stakeholders in the KEP process. The governance around the KEP process itself is within SIG architecture. But again, SIG PM is a strong stakeholder, especially in terms of the views associated with multi-release value delivery. And we'll talk about that in a bit. But the API review process feeds from this. The release process has a strong tie to this as well. So increasingly what we're going to see is KEP as the heart of a lot of the key activities and how we track value over time so that there's a chain of custody.
Right, so starting off right at the beginning of the KEP, you kind of, if you're proposing a change, you want to understand why someone's proposing a change, right? So the motivation section is essentially that, right? What is the need? What are we trying to solve? And how can I describe the significance of the actual problem that we're trying to solve, right? So this is extremely important because if you imagine, again, we're talking 31 SIGs, we're talking multiple working groups, we're talking sub-projects across the entire project, people that are living across disparate time zones, like we need an opportunity for people to have a singular ingress point into understanding how change is happening, when it's happening, who is owning that change, right? So that's what the motivation section is about.
Yeah, it's also, think of the motivation of a KEP as being, I have something that I want to accomplish within Kubernetes, and I don't necessarily have the power on my own to do that. And so you're creating the motivation as a way to also motivate the reader to want to be involved in what you are delivering. So if I've got 10 things that I'm working on and I'm going to have to bump one of those things to work on another thing, the motivation should convey the significance and the import and all the things that are necessary around what you want to accomplish so that it draws other people into the work and draws the SIG into the work and draws whoever the stakeholders are. So the motivation becomes a key part of conveying the value of what you're doing and also the urgency and the importance of it. So that is a really, really key part of the process.
So now we have, in addition to the motivation and essentially summarizing what the enhancement proposal is about, we've got all of these artifacts, right? So common questions around Kubernetes are, well, if I'm developing some new API or I'm developing an extension for an API, how do I actually do that, right? If I am an operator, now that this enhancement has been proposed or it's in an alpha state, how do I actually consume that and provide feedback, right? So we have the concept of guides, developer guides, operator guides, a teacher's guide. If I'm going to tell you how to do this in future, how do I do that, right? There needs to be some finite set of instructions for doing that. So we're proposing guides as well as graduation criteria. Graduation criteria is pretty huge. So the idea that if anyone is familiar with the release process, essentially there is a features collation or enhancements collation at the beginning where we essentially reach out to all of the SIGs and say, hey, what are you working on? We go through a list of issues within the K enhancements repo and then turn those into a spreadsheet and ping people in the span of a quarter, essentially, to keep that up to date. So it's important as we move through these steps to understand what's the criteria for moving a feature or an enhancement from alpha to beta. Right? Is it experience reports? And experience reports is on the fly, right? Is it a level of testing? What are the end-to-end tests? What is the documentation for these proposals, right? So, and then on the experience reports side, it's having the ability to bring the experience of an operator, of a teacher, of a developer back into the process, right? So the only way we're going to learn and accelerate the way that we develop Kubernetes is being able to actually essentially monetize on all of the experiences that we have across these 53,000 contributors or people who are in the Slack channel at this point.
Yeah.
So.
One more quick thing about this is that we want people working on things in Kubernetes to get used to in the habit of creating documents and all these necessary artifacts earlier and earlier in the process. Because one of the things that's really frustrating is that if a SIG has done all this great work on a feature and they're getting ready to ship it in the next release and, oh, the documentation isn't done, or there's some bit of provenance that needs to be provided in terms of the actual feature work that was done. That just slows everything up, and for no good reason. And it also tends to feel like docs are an afterthought or maybe not important, but one of the key covenants of trust that we have with our community is providing really good documentation, and we have an amazing documents SIG. So this is a way that we can empower them to empower us. And yet another way that we can do, as Caleb says, development at the speed of trust, that there's all sorts of areas in which trust is conveyed through these activities, and that's really, really important to the ethos of the community as a whole.
So let's talk a little bit about the KEP states, right? We have this notion and this kind of motto of merge early and iterate often, right? And we're kind of trying to bring that kind of more to the forefront more and more as people start to touch KEPs. So there is a draft status for KEPs, which essentially means, hey, this is my idea. I think it might be great. Maybe we should do it. Maybe we shouldn't. I just want to get it in front of people, right?
Yeah. And I think that this is a really important point for people. In the past, there's been a reluctance to merge a KEP because it feels like, oh my gosh, now we've committed to this thing. And that's really a misunderstanding fundamentally of what the metadata is supposed to convey. So when a KEP is in a draft state, it's completely uncommitted to. It's really the author saying, I have an idea, let's collect data and get people involved and start the process of getting an idea what this might look like, but it's not committed to. If my cat wants to deliver a KEP on how to get fed more every day, I'm going to say, go ahead, cat, like
let's see
bring
what you
it on.
got.
Let's see what you got. Let's see if you can get a SIG to sign up and bring you more food.
SIG cat coming
SIG
soon.
cat, yes. So that's we want to demystify / make it much more low barrier of entry to get somebody to put a draft in. We should have a huge draft backlog, actually. So
yeah. So I think that it's also a common misconception that it's only members of SIGs that are submitting KEPs, right? This is, think of, I open a repo, I want some new change, how do I do that, right? It's fine to submit the motivation and say, hey, what do you guys think of this, right? So moving forward in the process, we have the idea of a provisional state, which we have taken a look at the draft. We're starting to firm up details. The owning SIG has kind of actually looked at it and said, this is something we might want to do.
Yeah, it's interesting. Yeah. And then implementable is we've done all the legwork. We have an idea about what the core artifacts are. We know what the scope and breadth is. And when a KEP becomes implementable, which is really hard to say, it's essentially saying that the SIG is ready to commit to the work. Doesn't necessarily mean in the next release cycle or any specific time bounds. That's up to the SIG to do in their planning. But the SIG is saying, yes, this deserves to be prioritized and put into our work stream.
All right, so once we get, so there are different KEP states. There's a tree that we should probably create at some point, a little workflow diagram. But there are certain states that KEPs can move into that signify maybe it's not going to be worked on, or maybe we can't work on it. So deferred is one of them, right? The KEP is in place, but not actively being worked on, and deferred is, I think it's kind of left as an exercise to the SIG to decide what the level of deferment is. Right. There's rejected. This is a bad idea, but maybe the implementation isn't what it could be, or maybe it's something that goes contrary to something that another SIG is working on. Right. Withdrawn. That's the author decides, hey, I'm really not that interested in this anymore. So, and then finally, replaced. So often we'll see advancements in objects, in different resources and different data structures in Kubernetes. So an example would be TPRs to CRDs, right? So at that point, if someone wrote a CRD KEP, right, that CRD KEP would potentially supersede the TPR KEP, right?
So we're going to talk a bit about the tool that is being developed around this lifecycle. And the tool has commands that can be used to programmatically manage these artifacts and the metadata. The tool has an init state, which I think is super cool because it generates all the things that you need to start out to do that motivation and summary and have the metadata updated with the draft state, the author, and all that information.
And I mean, this is also like a reprisal of the initial KEP processes. After Caleb proposed it in August of last year, about ish, right? Since then we've had the opportunity to look at the way people submit KEPs and understand what their workflow is and try to adapt the tool to something that is consumable for everyone, right? So the states that are proposed within the KEP lifecycle are essentially the work product of that. So after you initialize your brand new KEP, your new shiny KEP, the next goal is to actually propose it, right? You've gone through each of the templates that have been generated in the init process. You understand what the motivation and the summaries are, and you've sort of identified potential stakeholders within the SIG and can basically place them in the document as reviewers or approvers.
Yep. And so you've got this proposed. Now I'm putting my SIG chair hat on, and I'm gonna look at this thing. And so for me, the next thing is to say, as an official representative of the SIG, maybe the SIG met about it, talked about it, and And there's enough agreement in the SIG that this is something that should be looked at further. And think of this as an early opportunity to either to possibly avoid waste, in a sense, that as a SIG leader, this is a point in the life cycle of the KEP where I can say we need to move forward or we need to pause. And so if we pause, we can either change the KEP state as some of the others deferred or whatnot, or we can leave the PR open for a while and maybe have more discussion or whatever we need to do there. But essentially, at the terminus of that decision, if this is something the SIG wants to move forward, then we accept it. Think of me as a SIG approver saying, I accept this as something that we want to explore. So it's not approved for work yet. It's just that we're moving forward.
Right. So once a KEP has essentially been approved, some of the next steps are to actually plan the structure of the enhancement. Right. So the KEP author is going to go through the documentation, actually work up some documentation. So whether it's in the form of these operator guides or developer guides, firming out what graduation criteria might look like. Again, it's very much merge early, right? So as you have ideas, you want to iterate on those ideas as quickly as possible. You want to serve those ideas back to the community so you get more feedback on them, right? It's not, we were actually having a conversation at the beginning of Summit about, should I bother with a KEP if I work, shouldn't I do a POC before I propose a KEP? Why not propose it first?
Yeah.
Get wide buy-in and then start on the POC, right?
Yeah, and then, again, you're convincing your stakeholders that this is worth investing their time in. And so the approval state is really saying this is ready to be implementable. We're committing to the work.
Sure, sweet. For the purpose of KEPs that affect APIs, there's also an API reviewal process, which is kind of tied to the scope of KEPs, but also, they're functions of SIG architecture, but loosely.
Yes, loosely coupled, but in the end, a API review could be blocking for the KEP as well, or at least change the design. So one of the key stakeholders in this process is the release process, because enhancements are how we talk about what gets included in a release, is in addition to bug fixes and whatnot. So part of the idea is that we want to have the enhancements repository serve as a way of keeping track of what was delivered, not, or slipped in any given release. And this is a key way that we can do that in the future.
Right. So this goes back to the spreadsheet that I was talking about a little earlier, where it's a lot of human work, essentially, to collate all of these things and constantly review and update the sheet. So the opportunity to programmatically solve this and have that stored in version control and be able to introspect on it across release cycles is huge to the project, right? We learn from our own mistakes, our own successes, right?
Yes, and future archaeologists, when they want to learn about this thing called Kubernetes that happened, in the mid-teens of this century, they're going to go back to GitHub and look at this and see what happened, and they'll actually be able to see what happened. So this ties into something that is a really big deal for SIG PM specifically, which is the idea that we could forecast what is going to be delivered release over release and have some sort of aggregate view of what that looks like.
Yeah, we're actually starting to get questions about that. So where's the roadmap for Kubernetes? It's I couldn't tell you. Yeah. I can read a few enhancements tracking sheets, but I couldn't tell you. So that's really to solve this problem. One, to introspect across the roadmap, and two, to be able to just provide visibility for not just people who are in the project, but anyone, right? This is a community project. So being able to have that visibility across the board without having to understand how KEPs work or how enhancements work is huge.
Yes.
So the developers on Kubernetes paid, or are they volunteers?
It depends.
It's a mix. Probably 80+% are paid, and
I was going to say, because with volunteers, of course, this gets really hard.
Yes. So
yeah, but that's a really interesting point. Is that if this process is designed and implemented properly, it should actually provide value. The idea is that any process that you put in is more value is delivered than the effort to participate.
So now we're going to have a quick Ask Me Anything.
Special guest.
With our special guest, technical program manager at Google,
Yes.
Caleb Miles,
Caleb
inventor
A.
of the KEP
Miles.
process.
Yes. And for the record, also, I believe one of the core inventors of the release process as well.
Yes.
And release teams and all that good stuff.
And one of the
On switch is annoying.
I am one of the founding members of SIG Release and SIG PM, the formal documentation for the release team. But mostly I'm a dude who sits in a chair, so if you're needing help, you can find me in that chair. So I guess I'm here for y'all. What kind of questions? What do you want to know about? I guess planning in Kubernetes, open source, governance, structure. You know.
I mean, don't all raise your hands at once.
Yeah.
Oh, sorry.
This is not awkward at all.
Yep, so in sort of this planning process, how do you capture discussion that happens sort of outside of the formal KEP and relate that back to sort of any architectural decisions that are made? Does that make sense?
So a lot of that, we do a lot of discussions in the mailing list, for your, active participant there. And, it has been more or less the honor system of, so the KEP process is designed to document consensus so that as you have a resolution and a discussion, whether it occurs on a mailing list or in Slack or on the pull request itself, you should update the KEP to reflect that. Thus far, we've been, like I said, as the implementers of the process, pretty hands-off and depending on the SIGs to do that. Because this really is a mechanism for to help the SIGs scale themselves and to scale trust. So if the SIGs aren't making sure that's happening, then there's a challenge. But it hasn't been a huge problem, I don't think, thus far. But that's just kind of the hands-off kind of strategy there. Giving people the tools they need and then, trusting them to use them correctly.
Yeah, I think for all intents and purposes, SIGs have been fairly self-sufficient in terms of gathering that data and pushing it back into whether it's an enhancement tracking, or a design proposal or what becomes a KEP, and applying the pull requests or the issue numbers, or we had a conversation over here. People are fairly good about it.
Any other questions? Oh.
You should get another mic.
Yeah, so I'd be curious to know, so you initially proposed adopting the Rust RFC process, sort of what did you take from that as valuable? What did you change from that? Sort of what was your decision process like there?
Yeah, so I guess the primary thing I was looking at from the Rust RFC process is being tied into source control and also being iterative were the kind of the big takeaways there. Also being more lightweight, I would say, than many other planning processes. And that there is a good coupling between the source control and the flat files themselves is important. Managing a large project is difficult. Like if you wanted to, say, use a tool like Jira, it becomes a question of who pays for the Jira, who operates the Jira instance, and challenges that we could resolve. But if you've been involved in the Kubernetes community, even like moving over some of our CI infrastructure is an ongoing challenge, right? It's a process that's been going on for years. It will continue for months and months and months from now. So this is a process that we hopefully is easy to teach to SIG leads and other interested people, to get editors involved in the process as well, so that it can be distributed the workload across all the different SIGs, the whole Kubernetes community. So the lightweight nature of it, more or less, and the strong coupling between source control and the flat files were kind of the primary things. Also, that you could use the RFC process to do all of the downstream things like build a roadmap for the Rust project and talk about and generate really high quality release notes for every version of Rust because you had that source content, 6 months in advance because you decided a higher technical bar it was important. It's not just code. Without documentation, there's no, in the general case, no real idea about how to use anything. And so it takes a real cross-functional team to develop and deliver actual enhancements to people. So those are kind of the takeaways that I brought from the Rust RFC process.
We have time for probably one more quick question, if anybody's got one.
You again? No.
So how would you decide whether, if you've got a new module, whether it should be submitted to Kubernetes as a KEP or done as a separate project and then brought in later?
So we're hoping to use the KEP process to really allow an enhancement author, whether they developed outside of tree or thinking about developing something outside of tree, to be able to motivate the importance of including their enhancement as part of the Kubernetes project. And kind of like a loose blessing from a SIG. So that's the idea of sponsoring a KEP, is that a SIG is really going to get invested in this and seeing this idea through to implementation. So if you believe it's important, that's why you just have a proposal, you file the motivation, really trying to motivate the problem. And a thing that I keep sending people back to is Russ Cox's blog about Towards Go 2. It really talks about the need for motivating change to help open source project maintainers understand kind of the importance of a proposal, given most people are incredibly overloaded in their day-to-day jobs. If that helps.
Cool. I'm going to go ahead and move 2 steps forward here and also give Stephen my contact information if you want to get
Stalk
that
us on
as
the
well.
internet.
Stalk us and let us know. We're going to be doing more roadshow activities with the KEPs library as well as CLI. And those in the room motivated to be Go developers and do things, and not necessarily even Go developers. You can work against the library in the language of your choice, but essentially, we have a reference citation for the CLI, but we would love other people to get involved, and you can contact Caleb, his GitHub, Caleb A. Miles. And yeah, we're super excited to see this really come to fruition in 2019, and we'll look for all of you to be participating. So thank you very much.
Thank you.